for the future, as our Deputy Governor alluded to the continuously changing landscape. We aspire to be a leading central bank committed to a prosperous Namibia, and our mission is to support sustainable economic development through effective monetary policy and inclusive financial systems for the benefit of all Namibians. And I really want to emphasize inclusive financial system for the benefit of all Namibians, as that filters through to our focus areas as well as to the FinTech framework. We have three main focus areas. Firstly, to digitally transform the Bank of Namibia. Secondly, modernize the financial system. And then also thirdly, to drive financial inclusion. As we embrace the opportunities that innovation brings, it's important to always be anchored and keep at the back of our mind our core mandate, that is to promote monetary stability and contribute towards financial stability conducive to the sustainable economic development of the Bank of the development of Namibia, as narrated in our Bank of Namibia. So the bank developed a FinTech framework to reduce regulatory uncertainty and to provide guidance on how we will treat FinTech innovation. The objective is to determine if the innovation falls within the FinTech innovation, falls within the scope of FinTech innovation, and how it interacts with the current regulations of the bank. Through the framework, we want to support, encourage, and embrace the introduction of innovation, and also understand disruptive innovations by collecting evidence, data, that will inform our regulatory development, similar to what we have done with the admission of virtual assets and virtual asset service providers, to bring them under our framework and to understand them better. We also then established a regulatory program that allows FinTechs to be tested and launched within a controlled environment, again balancing the opportunities and the risks that it may pose. And then lastly, all of this, it provides us an opportunity to collaborate, to discuss, to understand what are you doing, what are the challenges that you face, and how we as a central bank can then address them, and what are some of the regulatory impediments currently posed. So the scope of the framework, it applies to FinTech innovation and activities both from local entities as well as foreign entities. It applies to startup, big tech, as well as to entities that is already licensed by the Bank of Namibia that may be introducing FinTech innovation or activities that is not catered for by the existing regulations. The second one is quite important, ladies and gentlemen. It applies to innovations in the areas of our regulatory ambit, that is payment systems, banking, cross-border remittance, and then we bring the exemption for virtual assets and virtual asset service providers to understand the disruptive technology. Lastly, we're looking at whether innovations provide easily accessible financial services, whether it enhances financial inclusion, and what are the identifiable benefits to the consumer as well as to the economy at large. We follow a four-step or four-stage analytical framework. Firstly, we want to identify assessing your business model, whether it is in the financial services, do you make use of technology, what is the underlying technology that supports your innovation. We look at whether is this a new innovation or does it already exist in the Namibian market, is it catered for by our existing regulations, and then again, does it fall within the financial sectors that we as the bank are responsible for. Once we've done that assessment and it ticks the boxes, we move to stage 2, where we confirm the regulatory status. Then we try to understand, are you regulated by any other regulator, be that in Namibia or outside of Namibia? We're also trying to understand whether this innovation will exist in any other country, and how does it operate within that country. If you are regulated, we will then liaise with your regulator to obtain a good standing certificate, and how that then feeds into our assessment. If you're not regulated, we will then assess the risk. We will perform the risk assessment, and when we assess your business model, identifying the risk that it may pose, we will again look at what are the potential risks to financial stability, tying it back to our core mandate. We're trying to understand, are the funds collected protected? Are there any potential risks to depositors? We're looking at whether you will comply or the innovation complies with any money laundering requirements. and we look at how will cyber security and data security measures be implemented. Are there any risks that it may pose to the customer information or to the application itself? We will also try to understand your participation in the payment systems. What do you need to participate in the payment system stream, and whether it may pose a potential risk to the smooth functioning of the national payment systems and how we can mitigate the potential risk. And lastly, whether it will promote interoperability with the aim to enhance financial inclusion. Again, looking will it be a closed loop, or will it then integrate into the national payment systems? After the risk assessment, we have a full understanding of what's the potential risk, how we can mitigate it together, the Bank of Namibia together with the applicant, and we move to the admission of the regulatory program. There are two approaches, and the bank, based on the outcome of your risk assessment, will then decide will it be the allow and see program, or will you then best suited be under the sandbox program. We will discuss the participating conditions together with the applicant and agree with the applicant on the participating conditions. That may range in terms of the duration, how long will the program be. We will look at whether there needs to be limits in terms of customers, transactions, and balance limits. What are the reporting requirements to the Bank of Namibia, so we understand your operations, we understand how you are doing, what are the disclosure requirements to the public, and there we're looking at disclosing non-confidential information, also just so that the public are aware, because we will be announcing who's in the sandbox or who's under the regulatory program, but also keeping them informed as we go through this process. We mentioned cyber security and data security. We will then agree on what are the security tests that needs to be conducted based on your business model, based on the level of risk identified. So there will be varying degrees, and we will look at documentary submissions. Here we're looking at your communications plan. How are you going to engage the customer? We're looking at basic things like dispute resolution. If a customer has a dispute, do you have a plan or policy that guides how you're going to treat that dispute to ensure that the customer's concerns are addressed? And then lastly, if you are regulated by any other regulator, you will need to maintain the good standing that you've obtained at the beginning of the program, as well as adhere to those licensing requirements within those jurisdictions throughout the duration of the program. But the list is not exhaustive. We can add any other participating condition based on our risk assessment, but also based on discussion and collaboration with you, the FinTech. On this slide, we're just breaking down the difference between the two approaches. And again, the bank will then recommend which approach you're going to be entered into based on your risk assessment. In terms of the allowance fee, you may be allowed to go live without any or minimal regulatory conditions or participating conditions at the start. It's a very close collaboration between the bank and the FinTech. We're trying to understand how the operations are going, what are some of the challenges, and observe that. The bank may intervene if and when necessary, and then may increase the participating conditions or then include new participating conditions, just to make sure that the risk is then managed. Under the sandbox approach, this is where you test it. You can test the experiment in a live virtual environment designed by you as the applicant. It is a time-bound, it will be done in a time-bound manner. So the framework prescribes a minimum of 6 months and a maximum of 18 months, but the 18 months can be extended on a case-by-case basis. And you should have a clear exit strategy when the time lapses, how you're going to exit, how you're going to mitigate the risk, and then just to ensure that your exit is said earlier under this. There will be parameters, there will be key performance indicators that we will discuss and agree with the applicant upfront before entering the program. Once you have completed the program, what are the possible outcomes? So firstly, the bank may designate you, and you may be subjected to the bank's existing regulations. You may be granted an exemption subject to certain exemption conditions, or there may be a letter of no objection where you will be allowed to operate outside of the regulatory ambit of the bank. Depending on the testing, there may also be a letter of objection. That is then where you are not licensed to provide financial services due to the potential risk that it may pose, or the bank may then amend existing regulations or draft new regulations to allow your innovation to operate under. That is the end of my presentation, ladies and gentlemen. We have our email address on the slide. If you have any inquiries, if you have any applications, please reach out to us in terms of fintechinnovations@bank.com.na. A lot of the conditions, a lot of the assessments will depend, it's very business plan and business model specific. We plan to have more of these engagements, we plan to have smaller engagements, but we also have quite a number of one-on-one engagements and meetings where you present your model, where we can provide further guidance, just as Jataya in his presentation recommended. So that's all from my side. Thank you very much.
Is this normally an afterthought for the Bank of Namibia or something that you really want to engage on? Because I think my question is coming from the process is taking too long. Because sometimes, obviously, as an entrepreneur, you see an opportunity, but the response takes too long to complete. I think that's basically my question around timing, because I just believe opportunities are there to disrupt the market, but the process is taking a bit long. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for the question and also the constructive feedback. It's not an afterthought for the Bank of Namibia. That's why I started off with our vision and our mission, which is really tied to driving financial inclusion and creating a prosperous Namibia for all of us. We do take note of your concerns regarding the length of the process. We do aim to complete the process within a period of 2 months, but then maybe it depends on the completeness as well as the quality of information provided. The more information is provided, the faster we can proceed throughout the process. We're starting off, so we appreciate the feedback and we will definitely go back, reflect, and see how we can improve our processes to have a shorter turnaround time.
So, considering the fact that in FinTech, there's also, besides now Bank of Namibia, there's also other regulators in the industry, like NAMPISA, or let me say, the previous stock exchange. So the FIMA has been delayed this year. Supposed to bring out new the new FIMA regulations are supposed to accommodate new amendments also with other regulators such as the Namibia Stock Exchange, the Stock Exchange Control Board of State. So do we still have to wait for FIMA, or like the exemption of an amendment of the regulations does not have to help framing the right? If you understand the question.
Let me have to try and see if I can respond and if I understood it correctly. FIMA falls under NAMPISA, so it really depends on your business model. Like I said, the framework relates to the areas that we are responsible for, that's payment systems, banking, cross-border remittance, and our virtual assets. So it depends on what you want to do and what the requirements are. One will to engage you to have a better understanding, but it's important that we probably have that engagement. And then for me to go, or for us to provide better direction or guidance. But we do have collaboration with NAMPISA. The framework also makes provision that if you fall under the supervisory ambit of both the Bank of Namibia and NAMPISA, we admit you, and then we collectively oversee you under the sandbox or under the regulatory framework, the FinTech framework, sorry.
My colleague is asking how many applications received so far, because I think this thing was signed up last year, October. How many applications so far, and how many were approved?
We have received quite a number of requests. require it. I don't have the exact figure with me. If nothing in the room, she can assist. But the applications so far have been 3 applications. One has been declined, one is still under consideration, and we'll provide the feedback by today or tomorrow. And the last one is still under assessment when we just in discussion with the applicant. So that's why we're also trying to reach more FinTechs through this process, so that they're aware of the framework, they understand how it works, and then they engage us to see how we can then increase the uptake